MPO to order. First item is approval of the agenda. Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It is approved. Up next is the approval of the August meeting minutes.
Approval. Second.
Been seconded. Any discussion on the minutes? None. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Up next, our consent agenda. And if we get a motion, if there's questions about it, we can entertain questions after the moved and seconded.
Approval.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the consent? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Consent is approved. Up next, you have a report and vote on MPO member requests for services, and we're going to turn it over to Gavin.
Morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you. I want to talk you through a request we received for services from one of our member governments. The reason we're bringing it for you today is because this was not requested prior to the development of our work plan, so it's not in our current work plan. Not too long ago, we worked with the policy committee to put together a decision tree on what type of things we would say yes to. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the project, invite the mayor and their city administrator to speak about the project if they want to, and then show you how we interpreted the decision tree. We can actually interpret it a couple of different ways. But briefly, what the request is for would be for the MPO to revise and help redraft the raised grant application. They've done 2 previous rounds. So this would be a review and a rewrite, not a full build. So much less work than if you're building from scratch. We do believe that staff has the capacity. Our thought is that we would charge an hourly rate for this. Our rule of thumb has been if it's 10 hours or less, we wouldn't charge anything for it. So in this case, the first 10 hours would be free. Anything after that would be charged at an hourly rate. One note for you to consider is that if this grant were successful, there is some possibility that the city would be interested in the MPO administering the grant on their behalf. That is a separate decision. That is, if we get to that point, and we're lucky if we do, that will be a separate discussion at the city's discretion if they want to. But just want to let you know that could potentially be on the horizon. Okay, I'll pause. Mayor or City Administrator Adam, would either of you like to say anything about the project or what you're hoping for from the MPO?
73rd Street redesign phase 2 is University to Center Street, which would be the southern portion of 73rd Street. It's approximately a $17 million project. We obviously submitted 2 raised grants. We have used our engineering firm to draft the previous grant applications. I do recall a conversation that we had at Joe, you were there, at a personnel finance personnel meeting that we had about trying to look at work that MPO could do for smaller member communities, and I think this would be the example they could do. So those are my comments.
Got a question for you, Mike. Fully supportive of it. I think it's a great opportunity for MPO to help member communities. We went through a raised grant process ourselves recently, and we did not receive the funding, but we had an opportunity to participate within a debrief of sorts. Have you guys had that opportunity?
12:30 p.m. today.
Okay.
We'll be doing it in meeting here.
Good deal. Well, I think that the MPO has a good track record.
Any other discussion or questions from Governor?
One thing I'd like to point out is how we arrived at this decision, and we used the flow chart that you helped us approve. And in fact, there's a couple of different ways you can interpret this, and it kind of pivots on this question here of whether or not this is regionally significant or not. If you decide this is a single member for a single sponsored grant application, and it's not regionally significant, you kind of route through a few steps, asking if we have capacity, and whether they're willing to pay for it, and then we come to you and say, would you like to do this, and then we charge them. An alternative way to think about this is that we say, you know what, 73rd Street is a corridor that fronts multiple jurisdictions, West Point and Clyde and Montana. This is regionally significant, in which case we route it through and put it to a support position. And as this flow chart is laid out, that would not be charged for that. That's a decision for you all to make. I think it also highlights the limits of this flow chart, you want to say? Anyway, we just wanted to share with you our thought process on this. I know that governance and MPO role is something we're going to be talking about more in depth in the next agenda item. So we thought it was important to bring this to you and just put it in front of you and be very transparent.
Process. So just a clarification, are you charging an hourly rate or you're not charging an hourly rate to do
I
that?
think we could do either one and justify it based on this path. And then, like I said, it kind of pivots on this question right here. Is it regionally significant? Like in the past, when we said, when we were putting this together, thought was, well, if it's regionally significant, maybe we should just use MPO resources and not charge the individual government for it. So it pivots on that question right there. When we initially ran it, we kind of thought of it as this way, but as we were reflecting on it, looking at it more deeply today, we said, well, you could argue that it's regionally significant.
So are we making that decision now, or we just?
I'd like your feedback on that, yes.
So yeah, I think that's
We
probably.
welcome the feedback. Like Gunnar said, this is to charge them was our initial input. It might not take more than 10 hours too. So
Yeah, it's not a big, we're not talking big dollars. They said they're going to do it. I think they're gonna save a lot of money regardless.
Right now, you're only asking for the raise grant application and the administration of the grant. That is future decision.
Future decisions.
How have we had any similarly situated projects that give us some guidance on how we treat these things, whether considered regional or not, something analogous that we could look to for
No,
comparison?
this would really be the first case. That's why we're, right, part of the reason why we're bringing it to you, just to show you how.
Well, I appreciate that you're trying to follow the flow chart.
Agreed. Yeah.
We developed it. I'm supportive of the effort and so MPO supporting the grant. I think the way you judged it today is probably the right one in terms of the way you're kind of covering. It's very debatable, and you're right that it's a
I think, part of me thinks too, it's very clear cut, we're gonna know. And if here, if we're debating it, well, let's just be conservative, for lack of a better word, and go through this more circuitous process to get to that supplemental versus support.
You have, I mean, you have time.
Yeah,
It's not
we have
a
time.
budget, right? Yeah. Understand why we wouldn't do that for.
Do you have it down to vote, so we'd entertain a motion? To this flow chart?
So
That's a supplemental item in which we would charge them hourly rate after 10 hours.
Moved and second for the flow chart we're seeing now. Any discussion on it?
I'd echo Mayor's comments. I'm glad we're going through this process. And thank you for laying these sorts of things out. It gives us a framework, and so we can all sit around the table and, have some common understanding.
I would argue it's probably more.
It is a roadway that has regional significance, even though it is a 25-mile-an-hour road. It's, the level of service has to be terrible for how long. Pretty significant. Traffic flow.
I think the significance of the decision is the precedent more so than the dollar.
Yeah.
It's a transportation. Sorry, get money from the DOT. All right, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
All abstaining.
Make note of that. Motion is approved. Up next, item 6, report and discussion on governance assessment implementation steps.
Okay, thank you. We've got for you today a continuation of the conversation we've been having over the last several months. Last month, as you recall, we approved or received and filed the document that CAS put together for governance assessment. And within that document, there were a handful of recommendations. Did you see it up on the screen and in the agenda packet? We took the next step of breaking those into three main themes. You see those up there. So one of them is setting expectations of what we want from member representatives. So show up to meetings, be prepared, that sort of stuff that we talked about last time. The second one is enhancing member engagement. So how do we get people more ownership of the process? That could be committees, it could be providing more opportunities for discussion like we are today. And then the third one is what do the members expect from the MPO? So what is our role? What is how do we judge whether we're providing a good service back to the communities? Within those three themes, we then took a next step, and this is in the agenda packet on the following pages. Two, we set out a number of ideas or expectations, recommendations that we could do. And so really what we're moving from is, again, you all approved kind of the broad themes, and now staff is coming back to you and saying, here are some ideas that we've gathered as we've heard through conversations, some ideas that we have of what we could do. And what we really want to do is hear from you now. What do you think of these? We think these are good ideas. That's why we put them on here. But there might need to be some prioritization. There might be some further conversation to flesh out exactly what the recommendations are. You see there, some of them it's like option A, B, C that we could do. So we really want to hear from you. And if everybody's comfortable with it, this is what we're going to run. And if there's things you want us to pause, then we want to know that now so we can pump the brakes and tweak if we need to. So we thought what we could do today is go through each one of these and kind of just go down point by point here and hopefully not take a long time with it, but have a conversation on what do you think of this? If there's things where we say we can go option A, B, C, which ones do you take? Is it all the above? Is there one that really stands out to you? Because a lot of this is affecting you, but things that we're going to do, but it's going to have an impact on you and how you interact with this organization, how we interact with you. So that said, that sound good to everybody, what we want to do here? So we'll start walking through this. And the first one we really talked about quite a bit. It's defining member expectations and kind of putting together a representative handbook that lays a lot of stuff out. Seems like we've already talked about that. So if we want to talk about it further, we can, but that seemed to be kind of an easy one that we've already discussed. The second one, the chair talked about this a little bit last time too, of this conversation about in-person attendance versus virtual, and seeing what we heard was the preferences that you come in person. If you need to be virtual for some other reason, that's okay. We'll have that option for you. But we really want to get, we really want to target the chronic absenteeism that some of our communities have or some of our representatives have. Not so much on this committee, but on the policy committee. And what we've outlined here is maybe a process we can go through where if we see that someone's been missing several meetings in a row or missing half the meetings in the year, maybe the first step, our bylaws say that we send a letter to the community, to their mayor saying, hey, you missed a lot of meetings, consider reappointing.
What's a lot?
The bylaws say 3 meetings in a row.
Okay.
But we've got a few people that they missed 2, they show up for 1, they missed 2. And so they've missed over half the meetings, but they haven't hit that 3 in a row target. And we've been holding off for this conversation to actually send in letters, but maybe the first step is that the chair does a soft outreach and, hey, what's going on? And
Is that the same criteria you're going to keep as the 3, or are we still going to?
I think that's up for conversation, but I think 3 is okay.
Okay.
And so after that chair outreach, then maybe we reach out and do the letter. And then after that, if they're still not attending, we.
That's 3 months. Though.
It is.
That's 3 months.
And unfortunately, a lot of the reps are mayors, so sending a letter to the mayors and you haven't been here. But I think that's probably an area we're going to move into. And I think it's open to discussion. To your point, Mike, is 3 months. If they're missing 2, coming to 1, missing 2, they're adhering to bylaws, the bare minimum standard. Maybe that's a different conversation. Like, we appreciate the participation, but there's more than the bare minimum.
Yeah. And we can also emphasize, especially for the policy committee, you have alternates.
Yeah.
Send your alternate. You can't make it. Right. And so that can be part of that mayor's initial outreach, or the chair's initial outreach is, been missing some, please send your alternate. If you have an issue with that, you can appoint multiple. You can, here's some solutions to help before we get to the more official send a letter. Going down the list there, orientation process is something that was brought up a little bit last month, I think. The way we used to do it was we'd have a big meeting, usually the first, maybe the first meeting in January prior to the policy committee, an hour or so before, invite everybody there, we'll go through everything. And what happens is maybe we get one person, if that. So we started switching to do more one-on-one meetings as someone's appointed to the board. I'll go sit down with them or someone from staff will sit down with them and walk through it. So we participated in those. I guess this is really looking for your feedback. Which one works better? Do you prefer a big?
I never got that orientation 10 years ago.
That was-
That'd be nice to have. How about you, Bob?
I don't remember 25 years.
Okay, that's what I wondered. So, yeah, it'd be great.
But if, you know, is it overkill or do we invite everybody? Like, let's get a refresher every year. Even if you're a seasoned veteran like some of you are, you know, to do something like that. If that's the case, we need people to show up. I guess is the challenge there.
I guess my 2 cents is I trust your judgment based on a scenario. We have, you know, our crew of incoming new representatives and set a class format. If it's only 1 or 2 people and you can't coordinate the schedules, I trust your judgment to figure out the schedule. I think that the important piece here, in my mind, is that we're offering everyone. And there's probably some visibility to that to the policy committee. So you know, maybe a report within a director's report or something like that saying orientations were offered or facilitated or whatever. I think that's enough.
I appreciated the orientation piece. I think there was 3 invited, 2 of us showed up, right? There was value in obviously that exchange.
And having multiple people there, it is nice because you hear questions that maybe you're thinking of. So we'll continue to work on that. There's a couple other ideas is maybe identifying again some folks that have been around a while, almost serving as ambassadors to the new folks and reaching out to folks. So let's take someone under the ring of like, here's what the MPO is. And could also provide a value add if it isn't even with the MPO, that a new elected official in the region, even if it's not MPO business, you can tell, here's what regionalism is like in the metro area. Also, there's an association of MPOs that's just recently offered an MPO 101. It's an online course, and it's pretty intense in terms of the time commitment. But if folks wanted that, that's something we can offer to them. So just be aware that that's out there. Final idea there is that we could just build some of these orientation pieces into our meetings regularly. Like we have outside presenters. We could also just, hey, we're going to take a minute and talk about the law. Not in the heat of when we're doing it, but let's just talk about it. Funding program or whatever it might be, just so we're constantly being reminded of what some of these forecasts are.
That's probably not bad idea.
And they can be all the above here. So I mean, this isn't like one. Yeah, just again, it's final thing on there, number 4, and this is maybe a bigger philosophical conversation. So we'll see where this goes, but essentially reflecting on the role of this committee, of the executive committee. You know, there was a lot of discussion of, does this committee have too much power? What's the role of the policy committee? Is it just more of a rubber stamp after this group has talked about it? And there's some things that we've done to try to put more emphasis on the policy committee. But one big question too is, what do we want from this committee? We have what we've always been, but that doesn't mean that's what we have to be going for. So really, what do we want this group to be? How is it from staff's perspective? Too, I think that's the consideration. What do we need from this group too? And I've talked to some of you more recently in our one-on-one meetings. Is this group redundant? Is it necessary? Is it helpful? And I've heard both things. I've heard some folks say, no, it's kind of, you know, we hear the same thing 2 weeks in a row. And I've heard someone, it's nice to hear things 2 weeks in a row because it gives more time to hear it and reflect it and so forth. So
I think there's value for this group to be able to vet some of those subjects, get some of those questions out there, allow staff some additional time or the additional information, or hey, I don't understand this. Now you have an idea of what the questions of policy will be. And you've already garnered some support at this level. I don't know that we should be voting on those things. I really think that's the policy piece. But I think vetting those things at this table has value.
If it's like a work session.
Yes,
For the
most definitely for the policy.
and that's something that we kind of debated, but it's on this committee. We still have votes on here, but that's something that I know the chair has mentioned and we've looked at is taking votes away. We discuss it. We hear your comments going forward. We can make adjustments, but no official votes happen here. That way, it's very clear that the policy is making a final decision.
Staff's been pretty implemented a lot at policy committee. You'll hear now the exact recommended staff, or I'm sorry, the exact recommends as opposed to exact approved. So there's a little more of an open-endedness there, but it is a final if the policy board approves it. So I think personally, I've always, coming into it, I have a significant years of background with Joe and WA and RZAC there, and there's no votes. It's just an open discussion, or like to your point, Lynn, what we talk about. I have these questions, if anyone have any major concerns, what are they, and then move on. Yeah, I like the direction we're going. It's much more of other committees, and I think the rub between exec and policies hopefully diminished a little bit, but this may just, we're not deciding things here and shoving it down policies. This is the sounding board of the larger communities along with the sub areas. So it's giving direction.
If I may, one thought for your consideration is that there are 3 months out of the year where policy is not meeting. To approve. So stripping your ability to vote on things entirely.
We'd have 3 more policies.
That would be an option.
And we can, there's certain things throughout the year that it's easy to push them from month to month. So if we don't meet in May or March, I should say, that's okay. The problem is there's a couple months like July, we have to. July's one meeting is where we traditionally don't meet. So maybe we switch, maybe we don't meet in August, we still meet in July, something like that, and still keep the 9 months out of 12.
And we may seek some guidance from the policy board on those rare occasions where there isn't a policy meeting. What we're all I think is it memorialized, or is it kind of just?
I believe it's in our bylaws. So
Yeah, we'll have to change our bylaws. We do. Well, correct.
we'll double check that. It might be the policy.
No immediate change.
And that's,
I'm pretty sure Mayor Gear went through the reorganization where we all went through the reorganization of the
we can do that. That'd be similar to what we did with that.
The only thing to say about that is that excludes alternates and we want to allow. We are committees.
Assuming the volunteers still the committee.
I am not a committee, so just being honest. So,
I think there'll probably still be a little bit of arm twisting here. And I want to serve.
And to that point, Mayor, this overlaps with the next section a little bit. We're kind of doing this in the middle of the year, but going forward, when we put together our work program, which is, you could look at it almost as strategic plan, do that could be a time that we identify, here's all the projects we're gonna do, here's all the committees we're gonna use to do those projects. And that could almost be a larger annual meeting type of thing where everybody falls here, primary and alternate. Here, who's interested.
The only thing I would say is that sometimes committees, if they don't have sort of an immediate direction of organizing, they can slow the process down because they might never follow me. Not saying I'm guilty of it, but I may or may not be guilty of that. And so, so I think, you know, some of that consideration should be given that it might be appropriate to group types of projects or not have a committee for each and everything. Or if it's slowing the process down to come back with a recommendation, because honestly, I don't want to slow down the work of the MPO to hold for a committee that hasn't met for 2 months that's supposed to, if that makes sense. So, I'm open to getting more people engaged in that way, and I think it could be really good. I just also don't want to come back to me and say, oh, well, we haven't met on this like we were supposed to, and we're delayed another month.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from staff's perspective, two things. One, that would be upon us to make sure that the committees are, that we're holding you accountable and meeting. And sometimes it might be, we're holding this meeting and you show up and that's what we had. And that's okay.
I think it's just important for everybody to know what committees we have and what their role is. Until Dylan and C approached me about traffic management advisory, I had no idea that we had anything. Looked at safety internally. And then after having those discussions, I'm now the chair of that group because I have great interest in the subject and background. But just knowing that we had that committee was something I was.
And that all goes back to the patient piece and everything else too. So these all relate to one another. The other thing I'll mention about committees is, and this isn't really discussed up here, nothing we've really talked about yet, but I think we have a technical committee, we have a policy committee. I think that those subcommittees or working groups should include both. So I think that you all are going to need to hear from the technical folks on some issues, and I think they're going to need to hear from you as well. So we would envision having a little bit of both on those committees. So I hope it doesn't turn into it's all one or the other. So again, it's on us to keep those going.
Is there elected on the technical committee right now?
No, they're all, it's whoever you
All
elect
staff.
in your community.
Yep.
The final thing kind of related to this committees is potentially, I've seen this with other MPOs or similar organizations, is they've gone to it's their elected officials of the board members who do the conversations and lead the conversations at the meetings. I know that puts more work on folks. I'm not saying that's our definite recommendation, but that's something I want to put up to you. Would you like that? The way these other groups work is if it comes through a subcommittee, or if every project goes through some sort of committee, that committee fleshes it out, and then maybe the chair of that committee or representative is the one that presents it. Staff standing. Definitely be there to help.
How about we just reinforce with your staff instead of putting it all on a bunch of part-time elected officials and kind of fanciful,
Yeah, that's fine.
at least for me.
And I think,
Well,
I got plenty to
I can
do.
tell you that if I was committee discussion with something, it would probably be a lot more high level. But I think that the members of the committee should be involved in the conversation, or that should be an expectation 100%, but, working together for the.
and it seems like there are times where it lends itself more to that sort of thing. So when the funding subcommittee gets together and they hash out the things, oftentimes it's a representative of that or the chair that does a lot of discussion. If it's a tip amendment, no, we're not expecting someone. It's pretty routine. One more area to go through here real quick, and that is defining the expectations and role of the MPO from our members. So one thing, we want to get more involvement in our member communities, from the board in the work of the MPO. And so one thing that it really boils down to, as I said a moment ago, when we put together our annual work, having more involvement with that, because that's really a way we can almost have the work program serve as our strategic plan and think of it that way. Right now, we probably look at it more as it's our budget and there's check boxes that DOT requires that we should do. That's really the document and the work effort that tells us, here's what we're going to do over the next year. Here are the main things we're going to try to focus on. Here's stuff from our long range plan that we really want to see forward. Don't get a lot of engagement, to be honest, with that outside of the budget aspect. And that includes from the technical committee. We offer up, just like we did with Windsor Heights. What do you want the staff to work on? What do you want the assistance from with the MPO? It's, you don't usually get it. Trying to emphasize that a little bit more throughout the years. And that could also fall in line with just doing an update for our strategic plan. We have done this since 2018. The work that we've been doing kind of lends itself to that, but doing a more formal, it's recently. Mission and vision, having that focus more on the organization than on the transportation system. There's been some confusion over that over the years. And then one thing we used to do, there's speak to number 3, is getting back to maybe doing more regular performance surveys. So that's something we did a couple of times in the last decade, is asking communities, are you getting what you need from the MPO? What's bring us on a couple different things here. Communications timely, are they like that? Just simple things, then we kind of get benchmarks over time. Any feedback on that?
Kind of like the idea of, quite frankly, when we're doing that budgeting discussion, that we do a more of a workshop format, invite everybody, including the committees, in to have some of that discussion, use that as our strategic planning time. Like the idea we're 6 years behind strategic plan. I think enough is happening at a fast enough pace that we should be visiting that annually and making those tweaks instead of waiting.
So that's a conversation he passes here. That's something she's advised too, is don't do a 6-year strategic plan, do it.
If we were to do an annual, it'd be important to do it in January, February before new members come in. So that way those people who are leaving, who have experience, can formulate that plan. There shouldn't be, our next one maybe more lifting than what would be once we got that rate percent.
Just so long it doesn't take 10 months, like what we said.
Yeah,
right.
That sounds painful.
Get through update.
Yeah, I think the last one was.
It did, and then we revisited it a couple of years ago, that day that we had it. And
We're all in a better.
I guess we'll revisit it again.
We're all in a better place now to move quickly, because I think we're kind of lining that vision through all of this. Where we want to go, kind of fished out a couple of the issues. So I think so. It's probably organized. We'll make it quick, efficient.
Let me tell you, the 10 months, there was a lot of pain.
I heard that. The
Marion
was
would agree with me on that. That's true.
it sounded like it was finally just launched the damn thing.
It was messy, very messy.
I had highlighted the CPA workshops to figure out how we can work together in these larger sources, rates, CPF, SS4A, that where we can have communities get together and find out regionally significant project. The odds of winning those dollars goes up significantly. Success. At multiple jurisdictions get together. Security is one. Whether it's just MPO helping out to get those letters of support or data in for the applications.
Yeah, kind of back to that decision tree we talked about in the previous item, that would really be a time to identify what are we needing, what are we supporting. Making sure everyone's on the same page with that, rather than me and staff, here's the things we have to do, this is what we do, and if no one's really asking for sure. That's always our struggle with it. So this would be a bit of a process. And to the timing of that too, we can give that some more thought. Officers change in March, but new representatives take over in January. So that would be, we don't typically have a lot of turnover though, so it wouldn't be that big a deal if we had a one. Yeah, there was a big election cycle where changes. That would be preferred.
What month do we not? We've got 3 months. We've got July, we don't meet.
So March, July, and
Maybe December would be a good month.
would be a good work.
All good spirits.
Yeah.
December. For sure.
We can do planning Christmas party, holiday party.
That might be, yeah, that would go towards, that might be something where serve dual purposes.
We'll go back to the. So what you're gonna go to? What? Oh, on the previous page, that just reminded me on the previous item, the very last thing there is rebooting the speaker series. I kind of glossed over that, forgot to mention it. This is something that we toyed around with. We typically set aside some funds to bring in outside speakers. The question we have for you is, when would you like those to be? If you would like those, when would you like them to be? I think a couple options are to do them in those off months, like we just talked about. We could do them after board meetings and have them be more of a social type of event to get the business meeting of the meeting of the board venue, have some food, drink, and hear from a outside expert on something too. Again, it doesn't have to be one or the other, it could be different things, but just want to feedback.
To be honest, that probably not. I have lots of meetings. I'm probably not staying around on a basis afterwards as much as I would actually like serious work people. So if you wanted to do it that way, which I think makes a lot of sense because we already have a captive audience, and maybe moving the meeting up all at once so that
I'm curious, you said reboot, and it's just previously done. What was the success like? Did you have participation? Because I kind of agree with Nick here, like,
When we did it previously, did you want to speak to it?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It was more externally focused and we engaged a lot of stakeholders. I think Dylan and I are trying to be very focused on treating you as our primary audience. And if I were to retool that program, I would want you to get first primary consideration for it. Try to get speakers that are directly relevant to the decisions you're having to make today and now. And so bringing it to you in the place where you already are was why we put that out there as a suggestion. And as Mary Clark said, I totally understand the line. It's pretty nuts. Another variation on that would be have a condensed half-hour agenda that is then all day guest speaker, so that we're trying to fit within an hour of the time, but still bring that value of the networking and the outside perspective.
And that would be an every month thing, that would be a once in a while, as it lends
I think
itself.
you could, I mean, if you wanted to program it, you could do something like quarterly at most. If I were to design it, I would probably do it contextually, as in comprehensive safety action plan is a big thing for us right now. So somebody to speak on that topic matter and to tailor it more to what's on your agendas. You know, I further approach it.
in more of a regular business, they could be moved into consent agenda that anybody could pull off if they had a question, you know, just to cut down some time.
That's something that kind of maybe glossed over earlier, but that's something, probably noticed that we've been doing this. Trying to stay within the mayor's hour he wants to see, but also keep it pretty, only a couple of key items, so there's more time for this kind of discussion.
Let's go less than an hour.
We want to make sure we get our business done. I want to make sure we foster good communication and good discussion. I'm
still
going to
trying
show
to
up,
get
I'm not going to show up for 15 minutes.
I'm trying to get my head around the speakers that might come, and, you know, I guess first things that kind of come to mind is, you know, maybe others additional tips or tricks on grant writing. Are there new technologies out there that could be employed within either commercial vehicles or even residential vehicles like dash cams or something like that? Is there opportunities to obtain either safer streets through the use of these technologies or insurance premium reductions, and how that works out. A lot of those focuses for me might be more aligned with staff to attend rather than a representative to attend. So I like the idea in its premise, but the application for me, it becomes, I'm not sure if the alignment is quite right in my mind.
Sure. I wonder if it may be like a rotational, one speaker maybe during the day, like say at 1, that may be more to what we used to do with the regional partners and the staff, and then one maybe geared towards what's on our agenda, something we're working on to immediately follow that 30-minute meeting. So maybe just make a rotational speaker format.
Yeah, in the past when we did it, it was a little bit of both. We did have sometimes where we'd have a mayor from somewhere else, someone was more of a peer, and then we would target more the speed. Other times it was kind of more technical. Depends on what the case is.
Good discussion. Else?
I was just going to mention that Dylan and I were with conference with a bunch of other MPOs recently, and LA MPO has their end in spring, so thanks. Just want to throw that out.
Yeah, we can go to the Botanical Center.
That's not it.
All right, well, good discussion,
Thank you for
everyone.
this discussion and feedback.
We can move on to report on the comprehensive safety action plan update. Zach.
Thank you. Just want to give you a quick update on where we're at with the comprehensive safety action plan. The consultant is continuing to work on this project. Currently, they are collecting an additional round of public input. The first round kind of identified some key areas of safety. They asked the community to look at identifying places where they had near misses or places that they felt were dangerous. So identify those. That kind of helped the consultant develop their high risk and their high injury networks along with a bunch of data. And then now they're asking the public to come back and identify like one key priority area that they want to see addressed in this plan. So it's an online format. They go on and they can see the high injury network, the high risk network, and they can identify a location there on that map. So we've been pushing out that link to try to get as much feedback as we can on that. This graph on the screen kind of tells you where we're at. The consultant is currently in that space where the red triangle is. So they're working on the countermeasure toolbox. They're working on safe streets visualizations, and then the implementation plan and program. We should start seeing drafts of these here in the next 4 to 6 weeks from a staff perspective. And then once we review those, we'll be seeing those drafts as well. Following that, they'll develop the actual plan, which we currently have tentatively scheduled to come before the committees in January for approval. And then the consultant will begin working on the implementation grant side of things. We did find out from the Safe Streets Roads for All people at the federal highway level that we do not need individual resolutions from every community. As long as we have a resolution from the MPO saying that we've developed this goal for reducing serious injuries and fatalities, everybody can fall under that. So if the community decides they do want to apply for a grant, they can use the MPO resolution to show that they're compliant with the regulations. So that's my quick updates.
On that, I would just say that I think it's really important for them to stress if we don't need resolutions from each community and support, then it's really important to stress that that information is then part of each city's CIP process. And then we're taking back to evaluate as part of our processes. Because if the MPO is setting this goal, cities are actually implementing as part of their planning process, then it doesn't.
No, that's a great point.
All on that subject.
That's it.
All right, we'll move on to the carbon reduction program funding applications.
So the deadline to submit these applications was back on September 7th. Received 8 applications from 5 different communities.
You can see a list of those applications there on the table before you. We received applications from Anthony, Moines, Johnston, 4 from the city of Pleasant Hill, and then 1 from the city of Urbandale. The total requested funding was a little over $9.1 million. And we had, depending on what the finance committee decided, we had between 5.5 to 7.1 million available. So couldn't fund all the projects. The funding subcommittee did meet this morning to hear presentations from the applicants. Took about 45 minutes to do all the presentations, and then the committee stuck around and they developed their recommendation. So ultimately, their recommendation was to award out 4.4 million of the available CRP funding, and then to hold back about 2.7 million in reserve for the next round of CRP funding. And then on this table before you, I have those same projects listed, but showing what the recommendation is for the funding subcommittee. The recommendation is to give $1.5 million to the City of Ankeny project, South Ankeny Boulevard project, $2.5 million to the City of Moines Fifth Avenue Fleet Street project, then $320,000 to the City of Pleasant Hill for a traffic signal improvements, and then $100,000 to the City of Urbandale for Douglas Avenue traffic signal synchronization. So for a total of $4.4 million. So that's the funding subcommittee's recommendation. We're just presenting this to you this month as informational. We'll bring it back in November for this committee to consider, make a approval on funding subcommittee's recommendation.
What's the local match for all that? Is there any?
It's a 820.
It is 820.
Yeah, it is
Okay.
820.
So I guess I want to go back to a comment made earlier in regard to involvement of committee members. When I think about the CRP program, we spent quite a bit of time during the past meeting talking about the criteria that exists and how we place that criteria on our priorities when we make awards. I'd love to know a little bit more insight as far as what was in the minds of the committee. And how do they review that criteria, and how do they apply that criteria within this recommendation? I don't not agree with it. I'm just curious on what was their thought process and how do they use the criteria in.
So am I the only committee member here?
You are, yes.
Oh, okay.
Would you like to jump in?
So we were actually, do you have the sheets?
Sorry, put you on the
I
spot.
don't think
No,
it
that's
was
okay.
in the packet.
So we were given a sheet that had every community self-reported, I guess. The carbon reduction of kilograms per day, I think, for all of their projects. And then there were 4 criteria, which were safety, ADA accessibility, equity, and then education and zero emission infrastructure. So those were sort of the 5 things that each application was asked to address. So I think for me, for example, you look at Urbandale's project, their carbon reduction kilogram per day, $100,000. The reduction per day was 3,267. The next closest one was Johnston's at 2,678. Urbandale's project was overall 125,000. Traffic signal synchronization. Johnston's project is at $30 million. The town would drive change. So for me, that's a really easy decision to make to award them the 100,000 signal synchronization. I think looking at the other numbers, same for Pleasant Hill, the number, the 320,000, and they want to put, what was it, the dilemma zone? can you tell them about the dilemma zone? Because I can't.
So the dilemma zone is that space when you're approaching a traffic light where it goes yellow and you have to make the decision whether or not to slow down, stop, or go on through. That's the dilemma zone. So trying to reduce people going into that dilemma zone is what they're trying to achieve.
So not only that, but no one else will have that other than Pleasant Hill.
We're not quite sure. I think the technology that they're going to use on that might be a little bit more advanced. But there are other areas that are doing similar things, just maybe not at the same time.
How do you know the lights can only turn yellow and red? I mean, I guess I don't understand. You had something that,
So there's certain signals you might have seen where, especially on higher speed corridors where there's a light.
yeah, where it flashes and said it's gonna be turned. Is that what this
So
is gonna
it's
do?
like that, but it uses a slightly different technology that it can better adapt to. It's,
Because most of those are in Pleasant Hill. It's on University.
Yeah.
Those lights.
and so, yeah, they already have that out there. This would just be a different technology for it. That would make it.
So is this actually in town, the Pleasant Hill, or where we lived in that?
It's on University.
It's the university.
Yeah.
Okay.
It actually sees the cars coming, just the onset of yellow. Right. Was my interpretation.
Right.
Okay.
You can identify the cars further away.
But as a driver, will I know that it's like when I'm going down University further towards where Southeast Spoke is? Well, it will tell me when it starts flashing that you're approaching, that it's going to be a red light because you're going 55 miles an hour. Is that what this is going to do, or what is this going to do?
I don't think that's exactly what this is.
Okay. All right, never mind.
I'll take
We'll try to get some more explanation.
No problem.
And then the Ankeny Des Moines, I think focus was on Ankeny safety improvements, bike trail, they're either gonna do a change. Overpass or underpass. Pedestrian improvements. Same for Des Moines, they do protect the bike. So. Those are the things that, and as far as why Johnston was any funds, I think there was concerns about local match, the fact that they are a significant ways off in their funding, the concern that funding and it's simply just sitting there for a very long time and it may not fruition. That's all. I'll say that, I guess. And I think it's sort of a wait and see approach. I think everyone's agreed with the project. Something that we can do.
Mike, who else is on your committee?
Jones.
Mark Snell, Scott Sanders, Bruce Brown.
Thank you.
You know,
Marquita, yes.
Marquita.
She shared with me that her takeaway from the Johnson project. So that's consistent.
And we can share anything that we, maybe explain the process from here as far as the approvals.
Yeah, so we would bring this back in November for approval. Once it's approved, we would update the tip. We would include this project to the tip. That action would happen at the November meeting. Is that what you're?
Yeah, and we made reference to a sheet that had the scores and everything. We'll make that.
Yeah, all the information will go out in the agenda.
Comfortable with exactly that policy.
Well, I think that was helpful. Thank you for going through that. When I think about this, I think about our prior conversation regarding those criteria. So I think really the main subject of concern there was, are we going to look at this as only carbon reduction? And what it sounds to me is, if we're not, that's not the approach we're taking. We are looking at this more holistically. We're looking at funding projects that really can get done and on a time scale. And trying to concentrate on making an impact across the region. So I think that process is kind of, explanations hopefully made to understand kind of the approach of the state.
And I don't think the carbon reduction worksheet was easy for people to negotiate and figure out. You almost had to have an engineer sit down and actually go through that and prepare that. So, I mean, there was obviously a cost, even the prep of getting to this point, so I don't know how we address that in the next round, but I think we need to look and examine how this one went and make some changes for the next round.
Got more done. Pardon, you said you got more of them done, so.
Yeah. How long have we had this grant funding before we started using it?
We,
So I believe it's been, we technically could have awarded funding back in the previous TIP.
Yeah.
And we presented it to the committees and asked if we wanted to go ahead and award that funding or not, or hold off. At that time, the committee wanted to hold off. They wanted to get the long range plan a little further down the road.
Okay.
We all know what happened earlier this year with funding to DART, and that kind of triggered a relook at how we move forward with the process. That's why we went through this cycle here.
But before the money was awarded to DART, nobody had
Nobody,
4 projects or 1 project or
this is
anything.
the first time
Okay.
we have taken applications for CRP funding.
Well, it was sitting there, Glenn.
You might not have process, the money was sitting there.
Right.
the money, yes, the money started accumulating when the infrastructure bill was passed. It took them a while to get the
Right.
criteria for us to respond.
All right, any other discussion on the CRP? All right, we'll move on to mobilize tomorrow draft chapters and Zach.
Just real quick update to let you know that we released the draft content for the LRTP back on September 3rd. We have a 30-day public comment period for that, so that'll close on the 23rd of October. In between that time, this evening from 4 to 6 p.m., we have a public input meeting here at the MPO office for the LRTP. And then any comments that we receive over the next few weeks, we will present those back to the policy committee at their October 17th meeting. And then in late October, early November, we will be incorporating any comments that we get that we need to make updates to those draft chapters. We'll be incorporating that in there prior to bringing the final plan back to the committees in November. Ultimately, it will be presented to policy on November 21st for final approval. Just a good idea. We have that out for, it's online. We have the public input meeting tonight. We are collecting comments. We received some comments already from some individuals on the aviation and freight chapter, so we're working on making some updates to that. But again, any comments that we receive, we feel like we need to get in there, if we gain those in there before the final draft. Happy to take any questions you have.
All right, thank you, Zach, for the updates. We have other non-action items of interest, maybe? Do we have any update on the guests here?
So based on the feedback or the clarification we received from Federal Highway Administration that we don't have to have individual communities their set targets, we didn't pursue that further because that was really good. We wanted to get a little more. We can still do that if people are interested. It wasn't as pressing.
The request was made, we haven't heard back from them, but we also.
And we'll just refocus on those. Anything else? All right, our next meeting is November 13th, 11:30 a.m. So thank you everyone for your time today. We are adjourned. Thank you.